I'm just an ordinary beta, but I'm Jackson Vance's most effective sedative. To cure his pheromone imbalance syndrome, his father paid an exorbitant sum to buy 5 years of my time. During his ruts, Jackson is clingy and sweet. He holds me, calls me his wife, and covers me in kisses and nuzzles. But once it's over, he lashes out. You're just a tool. Don't get any ideas. Then, at a banquet, an Omega with a 90% compatibility match with him appeared. I figured it was time to take the money and run, so I told him we were through and made a quick exit. But Jackson, who had always acted so indifferent, went berserk and smashed the entire ballroom to pieces. He even cut his own scent gland and came to me, sobbing and begging, "Honey, please come back. Boo-hoo-hoo. I'll be a good boy. Don't leave me." The man in the executive chair sat with his eyes half closed, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. A bodyguard stood behind him. Aside from a single warm lamp, the massive study was devoid of sunlight. "Martin, how many years has it been since you started looking after Jackson?" His voice was flat, but it sent a chill down my spine. "Almost 5 years. Even though I was just an ordinary beta, unaffected by pheromonal pressure, the sheer force of this powerful man's presence made my chest tighten with alarm." Arthur Vance's expression was unreadable as he murmured, "5 years. It's time for it to end. You'll leave next month," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. I frowned and offered a gentle reminder. "Sir, our contract still has another 6 months." Arthur scoffed. "Don't worry, you'll be paid in full. Or is it that you've fallen in love with Jackson and can't bear to leave him?" He narrowed his eyes, a mocking glint in them. Suppressing the bitterness and fear in my heart, I pressed my lips together, shook my head, and said softly, "Thank you." The moment I stepped out of the study, I ran straight into a searingly hot embrace. "Wife, where did you go? I feel so awful." Sniffle. Jackson buried his head in the crook of my neck without another word, sniffing me frantically. I never understood it. I was a beta so unremarkable you'd lose me in a crowd. I had no pheromones, couldn't mark or be marked. What was so special about me that made Jackson so attached? Wife, you smell so good." Seemingly annoyed by my distraction, he opened his mouth and bit down on my atrophied gland. The pain brought tears to my eyes instantly, but my tears were nothing compared to Jackson's. During every rut, he'd soak me in them, as if determined to drown me. "You're an alpha. How can you cry so much?" I was so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open, watching Jackson, who was still thrusting away while sobbing. I couldn't help but wonder if he was going to dehydrate himself. Perhaps thinking I was disgusted, he pouted and burrowed into my arms, whimpering, I can't help it." His strength didn't wane in the slightest, and the tears never stopped. "But I can't help it, boo-hoo-hoo. My wife is just too good. I love you so much." Sniffle and alpha stamina was terrifying. Even after almost 5 years, I often struggled to handle his sudden ruts. I could only give in, worn down by his assault of tears and sweet nothings. Thinking about what Arthur Vance had said in the study, a dull ache spread through my chest. It was all Jackson's fault for rubbing against my chest, leaving it covered in marks that made my heart hurt. I grabbed his hair in frustration. "Bad dog. NGH. He looked up in pain, his watery, crimson-rimmed eyes meeting mine. Perhaps realizing he'd gone too far, he leaned in placatingly and kissed my lips. I let him kiss me until my breathing was ragged and my chest heaved. He finished by licking the corner of my broken lip and argued, "I'm my wife's good boy." It took 3 days for Jackson's pheromones to stabilize. In the faint morning light, I studied him as he slept. His deep-set eyes, his strong nose, everything was just as stunning as the first time I saw him. "If I left one day, would you be sad?" I stroked his face, murmuring, to myself, "Probably not." Maybe my touch annoyed him. He frowned and grunted, the large hand on my waist tightening its grip as he slept nestled in my arms like a dependent child. I couldn't fight off my own drowsiness and fell asleep holding him. At least in this moment I thought we were peaceful and close. That was enough. In a state of half-sleep, I felt the warmth in my arms quickly recede and turn cold. He seemed to be standing at the door, talking to someone in a low voice. But in the pin-drop silence of the room, Jackson's dispassionate words still reached my ears. Don't worry about it. He's just a tool for treatment, that's all. Don't take him so seriously. Just a tool for treatment. Nothing more. A lump formed in my throat. When the door clicked shut, I forced my expression to remain neutral, feigning sleep, because Jackson was walking back to the bed. He didn't lie down again but simply stood there, staring at me silently. His gaze felt tangible, impossible to ignore even with my eyes closed. He didn't move for a long time, so long that sleepiness crept up on me again, and I actually dozed off. But in my daze, I felt a cool touch linger on my forehead, as light as the brush of a fledgling's wing. It was as fleeting as a dream. In my dream, I was back to the first time I met Jackson. He and his crew were causing trouble at the nightclub where I worked. I saw them cornering a server, but no one dared to intervene. I happened to be passing by with a tray of drinks for a customer when I stumbled upon the tense scene. When my manager saw me, it was like he'd seen a savior. Quick, go break it up, he said, pushing me toward the center of the storm. I looked at the burly alphas, then at my own skinny, underfed arms and legs. I pointed at myself in disbelief. Me, the manager, and Omega was looking worse by the second. He gritted his teeth. I'll triple your pay for tonight. I immediately straightened my back. You can count on me. But no one answered. Everyone was suffering under the high-level alpha pheromones. People scattered away from Jackson, including the alphas he'd brought with him, all of whom backed away with pained expressions. Just before Jackson could deliver a fatal blow, I gritted my teeth and stepped in front of him. Let's talk this out. No need to get violent. I tried to reason with him. The chaotic crowd instantly fell silent. All eyes turned to me, including the Omega I was shielding. His tear-filled eyes were staring at me in a daze. He probably never expected anyone would dare to talk to Jackson like that. Although I didn't know Jackson and was a beta immune to his pheromones, I could tell from everyone's reactions that I had miscalculated. It seemed maybe that I shouldn't have been so impulsive for triple pay. Sure enough, Jackson glared at me with a look so menacing it might as well have had "You're dead" written across his face. I was just starting to wonder if I should just run for it. But then the Omega behind me, startled by the sudden spike in pheromones, gave me a desperate shove. And so I went flying, splashing my entire tray of drinks all over Jackson. Ice cubes and alcohol slid down his handsome face, soaking his expensive-looking shirt. And I was plastered against him in a position that looked suspiciously like I'd thrown myself into his arms. There was no escape now. Time to close my eyes and wait for the end. But nothing happened. I peeked open one eye and saw Jackson, inches away, staring at me in a stupor. His rage had vanished, and the murderous aura he'd had just moments ago was gone. After a long pause, he finally spoke, his voice dazed. Are you an Omega? 5 minutes ago, I thought I was a dead man. But then, in front of everyone, he buried his head in my neck and started sniffing me like a giant dog. The heat of his breath flushed my skin, and my mind went blank. His arms locked around my waist like steel bands. Couldn't break free. Let go. Are you a fucking pervert? Not only did he not let go, he held on even tighter, letting out a sound that resembled a puppy's whimper. Sniffle, let me have a bite. Wife, who's your wife? Don't you fucking bite me. I'm a beta. At first, I really thought Jackson was just a creep, but it turned out he had pheromone imbalance syndrome. Someone had drugged him at the club, which sent him spiraling. I figured it was probably that Omega, so I couldn't blame Jackson entirely. I managed to forgive his outrageous behavior, but my luck didn't last. Before I could even collect my triple pay, I was presented with a treatment contract from Arthur Vance. $5 million to be Jackson's human sedative for 5 years. $5 million. It was enough to pay off my deadbeat dad's debts and give me some security for the future. I rubbed the fresh bite marks on the back of my neck. Being a server at the club meant getting groped and still barely making ends meet. So, I signed my name on the dotted line. I thought it would just be a matter of offering my neck for a few bites and acting as a living teddy bear, but Jackson got more and more demanding. And the man was a completely different person in bed versus out of it. I hadn't paid much attention in health class, so I didn't know if all alphas were like this. The more sweetly he called me wife when his pheromones were in control, the nastier his expression was when he saw me after he came down. Even so, I couldn't help but develop feelings for Jackson. Even knowing his kindness was just a symptom of his illness and not genuine affection, I take advantage of his ruts to steal more kisses and lose myself in his passionate embrace. I'd often tell myself that while a handsome guy with an 8-pack and a narrow waist might walk away, $5 million wouldn't. I got to sleep with him and get paid. I wasn't losing out at all. When I woke up, it was already afternoon. The space beside me on the bed was cool and neat, as if no one had slept there. When I went downstairs, the old butler brought me a bowl of ginseng soup, warmed to the perfect temperature. Mr. Jackson instructed that it be kept on low heat for you, the butler said, standing by with a kind smile. I looked at the dark concoction, took a small sip, and then spat it out with a blank expression. The butler continued, Mr. Jackson said that if you don't drink it, he will feed it to you himself when he gets back. I said nothing. After I finished the soup, the tip of my tongue was numb with bitterness. The butler promptly offered me a plate of peach pastries. Mr. Jackson had the chef make these for you, he said with his signature smile. He heard you liked them. I silently took one and bit into it. Mr. Jackson, stop. I rubbed my forehead, exasperated. I was starting to get PTSD from his name. What is it you really want to say? The old butler stood by, chuckling. Mr. Jackson cares for you a great deal. I bit my lip. He doesn't care about me. He's just maintaining his equipment. As I was lost in thought, the pastry was snatched from my hand. Yo, how'd you know I love these? Did you get them just for me? Tim grinned, stuffing the whole thing into his mouth. His cheeks puffed out like a hamster's. I jumped, then let out a sigh of relief when I saw who it was. Tim was one of the only friends I'd made in the past few years. He was, technically, Jackson's younger brother, though Jackson refused to acknowledge him. Tim was Arthur Vance's illegitimate son. The child of a woman who was never welcomed into the family was naturally scorned, but he would still get a share of the inheritance one day. As Jackson's human suppressant, I accompanied him to all sorts of events. His friends knew me, his business partners knew me, but no one ever gave me the time of day. I knew there was an invisible wall separating me from their world. But I was glad I was a beta who could handle himself. When Tim was cornered by two alphas in a stairwell, I grabbed him, leaped down, and we ran for a couple of miles. We were both out of breath when he asked me, "Why did you help me?" I was baffled. "Aren't you Jackson's brother? Saving the boss's brother should earn me a raise, right?" His expression went blank, and then the whole street echoed with his explosive laughter. I had only been with Jackson for a short time then and didn't know the drama between them, but ever since that day, Tim had been stuck to my side. Jackson never said a word about our friendship, except that every time I saw Tim, the frequency of Jackson's pheromone episodes would increase. "What are you doing here? You scared me to death," I grumbled, but I was mostly happy to see him. "Came to see you," he mumbled, his mouth full. So we spent the afternoon playing video games. Maybe it was because I was with a friend, but I felt a long-forgotten sense of relaxation. I casually told Tim that I was leaving. Tim's eyes went wide, and the pastry nearly fell out of his mouth. "Leaving? Does Jackson know? You think he'll agree to that?" I shook my head numbly. To be honest, I hadn't even considered that Jackson might not agree. Mr. Vance told me to leave next month. He's probably already discussed it with Jackson. Tim's face was slack. "Next month, I think I know why," he muttered. He pulled out his phone and showed me a news article about some young master of the Shin family returning to the country next month. I didn't usually pay attention to this stuff. Tim sat up straight, his expression serious. "Caleb Shin, the second son of the Shin family, is coming back next month. But most importantly, I heard his pheromone compatibility with Jackson is 90%. The old man has been trying to find a cure for Jackson's condition for years. No wonder he's suddenly telling you to leave. He's found your replacement." Even as a beta, I knew what a 90% match meant. The delicate, pretty Omega on the phone screen was a much better fit for Jackson than I could ever be. "Oh, that's great," I said, tossing the phone back to Tim without a change in expression. His mouth twitched. "Dude, don't force it. It's been over 4 years. You'd get attached to a dog in that time, let alone a person." Jackson did act a lot like a canine sometimes. I waved my hand dismissively and smiled. "Sure, I have some feelings, but my feelings for $5 million run deeper." Tim let out an imperceptible sigh of relief, a slight curve appearing on his lips. "That's good, then. You're free." It must have been tough, being around a psycho all day. I frowned, correcting him. "He has pheromone imbalance syndrome, not a mental illness." Right, whatever you say." He squinted, leaning in close, his breath tickling my ear. "In that case, could you consider me?" My brain short-circuited. Before I could even react, a low voice cut into our conversation. "Consider what?" We both jumped and turned to see Jackson standing in the entryway. He must have just gotten home. He walked past the sofa where we were sitting, frowned at the peach pastries on the table, and then fixed his cold, desolate gaze on me. "Upstairs," he commanded. Then he turned and went up, not giving Tim so much as a glance the entire time. I shot Tim an apologetic look. He smiled, patted my shoulder, and leaned in to whisper goodbye. It wasn't until he was out the door that I snapped out of it and ran upstairs. I found Jackson standing at the bedroom door with a grim expression. "You, MMPH." Before I could get a word out, Jackson yanked me against the wall, and a torrent of kisses descended upon me. Felt like the calm before the storm. My head was spinning. The man who had seemed so clear-headed just a moment ago was now completely transformed. I gasped for air during a brief pause. "Is your rut here again?" His eyelashes trembled, and he let out a barely audible "ahem." The next thing I knew, the world was spinning, and I was being hoisted up and thrown onto the soft bed. I pushed frantically at the man who was sniffing me all over. "But you just finished yesterday. It's never this frequent." Jackson seemed displeased with my resistance and bit down on the back of my neck. I cried out in pain. "It stinks." His pheromones, he mumbled into my neck. "Other alpha's pheromones affect me. It's all his fault." He sounded like a tattling child. I remembered my health book saying that alpha pheromones could trigger discomfort in other alphas. For someone with Jackson's condition, that discomfort was probably much worse. I realized I had been too careless this time. I lowered my head to soothe the hypersensitive man in his rut. "Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I won't let him stay in your space next time. Okay?" The man in my arms just turned his back to me and gave a muffled grunt. "And he can't touch my things." I smiled and said okay. But I didn't know that the eyes of the man buried in my arms were dark and cold, like a wolf poised to strike, completely unlike his usual docile self during a rut. At the banquet, Jackson, dressed in a tailored, high-end suit, was the center of attention as always, his expression cold and aloof. This was also the first time I had truly seen Caleb. He stood by Jackson's side, smiling sweetly as they chatted about something. He was just as fair and lovely in person as he was online, the type of Omega every alpha probably dreamed of. I stood on a distant staircase, holding a plate of chocolate almond torte, watching them for a moment before turning away to munch on my cake. It was good, but the almonds were a little bitter today. "You're Martin?" The Omega's voice was as delicate as his appearance, but it couldn't hide the disdain in his tone. Seeing Caleb suddenly appear before me, I nodded dumbly. Yup, maybe it was the smudge of cake still on my lip that made me look a bit foolish. He laughed without restraint, his sharp eyes scanning me up and down. A beta of all things. The curve of his lips was different from the smile he had when he was with Jackson. It was a little nauseating. What's wrong with being a beta? Betas make up 80% of the population. I grumbled internally but kept my face straight. Just as I was about to turn and leave, I was pulled into a familiar embrace. Jackson looked down at me and naturally reached out to wipe the cream from the corner of my mouth. "Jackson, Grandma is calling for us," Caleb said, his expression unchanged as he lightly tugged on Jackson's sleeve. Jackson frowned, looking toward a stern-faced elder in the distance. I took the hint and stepped aside, freeing myself from his arms. Caleb shot me a triumphant smirk and linked his arm with Jackson's. Jackson didn't look too pleased, but he didn't shake him off either. He just told me, "Don't wander off," before hurrying away. I didn't answer him. I could feel the gazes on me, some curious and amused, others disapproving and dismissive. Looking up, I met the eyes of Arthur Vance on the second floor. I obediently left with the people he had arranged for me. I'm not a stubborn person. I didn't even pack my bags when I left. I just had the driver take me straight to the airport. The evening rush hour, which should have been a nightmare, was surprisingly smooth today. But my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Jackson and Tim were calling me relentlessly. After hesitating for a long time, I finally answered a call from Tim. The second I picked up, Jackson's voice exploded in my ear. "Wife, where did you go? Why did you leave without telling me? Why aren't you talking? Are you mad at me? I won't let that Caleb guy touch me again, I promise." I washed my hands right away. "Don't be mad. You can punish me however you want. I'll do anything. Are you home? I'm coming back to find you right now." I heard the sound of a car starting and pinched the bridge of my nose. "You're in a rut, don't run around. Be good and find a room to stay in." Hearing my voice, the alpha stopped shouting, and the sound of the car died down. Okay, I'm out of the car." "Wife, are you coming back for me?" He replied obediently. I could almost picture his wide, pleading eyes looking up at me. "You know I'm just the suppressant Mr. Vance arranged for you. But I'm only a beta. I can't completely cure your condition. Now that you have Caleb, you won't have to suffer from a lack of pheromones anymore, and our contract is officially over. It's time for me to go." My throat tightened, and my voice came out strained and trembling as I said my goodbyes and hung up the phone. I took a red-eye flight to another city. It was the middle of the night when the plane landed. After that call, there was no word from Jackson. Tim, however, had spammed me with messages. "Holy crap, are you gone?" He snatched my phone and rushed out, then came back with tears streaming down his face and wrecked the banquet hall. He even smashed my phone screen. Caleb tried to use his pheromones on him, and he just punched the guy. Anyone who tried to calm him down got a slap for their trouble. It took several alphas to restrain him. He used a piece of glass to cut his own gland twice. It was a bloodbath. An ambulance had to take him away. But you know what Arthur Vance is like. After a scene like that, who knows what he'll do? "So you're really gone? For good? You could have at least told me." I wouldn't have told anyone. I silently snapped my SIM card in half and threw it in the trash. I started a new life in a new city. With the money from Arthur Vance, I paid off the debts my father had left behind. I stood before his gravestone and burned the payment receipts. I went back to school to finish my degree, but I had trouble adjusting. The years-long gap meant I was older than everyone else, and I often felt out of place in their conversations. But just being able to be a normal college student, walking a predictable and ordinary path, was satisfying enough. To fit in, I joined all sorts of activities. I threw myself into my studies, filling every moment outside of eating and sleeping. Gradually, I got used to this life. At our department's end-of-year party, I was taking a drunk and heartbroken friend back to his dorm. The alpha, half a head taller than me and completely sloshed, was leaning most of his weight on me. He was still mumbling, "Why did you break up with me? Just the other day you said you liked me." Ryan slurred his words. He had just broken up with an Omega from the next department a couple of days ago. But while he seemed heartbroken, he really wasn't. He went through this kind of breakup 1 to 3 times a month on average, and always with a different person. I didn't get it, but I respected it. I dragged him for 2 blocks while he asked me 15 times, "Quinn, do you really love me?" He was on the verge of a full-blown meltdown, and to avoid having the neighbors call the cops for a noise complaint, I could only placate him. I love you, like a mouse loves cheese." "Really?" he asked, staring at me with puppy dog eyes, though his gaze wasn't even focused. I wondered if all alphas were like dogs. I nodded, crossed my heart. I thought that would finally shut him up, but it only made him more energetic. He started hitting on me with cheesy pickup lines. Without you, I'm afraid I'll turn into a river. What river? A river of sorrow. There was a river right next to us. I really wanted to kick him into it. I actually felt sorry for that Omega Quinn for 3 whole seconds. Just as I was about to kick him, I spotted a luxury car parked at the last intersection. It wasn't uncommon for rich kids to show off at school. Some had even caused trouble by racing and showing off their wealth. It was dark, and I couldn't see the license plate. Plus, I was still hauling a squealing Ryan, so I really didn't have the energy to care about the car. But I felt a strange sense of unease as old memories resurfaced. I laughed at myself. Just PTSD. I was starting to see him everywhere. I clamped my hand over Ryan's mouth and dragged him back to the dorm. 3 years later, thanks to good grades and a professor's recommendation, I received an excellent job offer. Everything was perfect except for the fact that the job was in a city thousands of miles away. The company's explanation was, it's a new startup over there. The growth prospects and opportunities will be a better fit for you. Memories from years ago suddenly came flooding back. I shook my head, trying to banish the memories along with the man in them. Honestly, I didn't want to give up such a great opportunity. I suddenly understood my gambling-addicted father's mentality. The city was huge. I hadn't had any contact with those people for so long. As long as I stuck to my daily routine, I bet we wouldn't run into each other. So, with a few strokes of the pen, I signed the contract. My colleagues were easier to get along with than I expected, and the job benefits were great. Just as I was congratulating myself on a winning bet, I ran into Jackson. The Omega at the desk next to mine was dragging me into a discussion about the new CEO. He's definitely an S-class alpha. Just one look and your knees will go weak. I laughed at him. Can't be that dramatic. You just haven't seen him. Even a beta would be captivated. The new CEO had started yesterday, but unfortunately, I had taken a sick day. Ding. The elevator doors slowly opened, and everyone who had been slacking off a moment ago immediately straightened up. Even the Omega who had been daydreaming a second before started typing furiously at his desk. Only I remained frozen in place. His features hadn't changed much in the years since I'd last seen him, but his presence was much more powerful. No wonder he could silence a room in an instant. His dark eyes swept over me, like a bottomless abyss brewing an unknown danger. I swallowed hard and only snapped back to reality when a colleague kindly nudged me. See? I told you even a beta couldn't resist. But Mr. Vance, as handsome as he is, looks way too intimidating. Before the Omega could finish his gossiping, I was summoned to the CEO's office. I stood at the door for a moment, running through possible scenarios, then put on a standard professional smile and walked in. Mr. Vance, what can I do for you? Jackson frowned, his expression grim. Perhaps seeing me standing so far away, his tall frame moved toward me step by step. I couldn't smell pheromones, but I could sense the displeasure radiating from him. The worst-case scenario I could imagine was him beating me up and telling me to get lost. If that happened, I was definitely getting full severance and medical expenses. But the next second, the towering Jackson buried his head in the crook of my neck, holding me in an awkward embrace that left no space between us. Wife, my body went rigid as I felt him nuzzling my neck, making it itch. Huh? Is this right? My brain crashed. Without thinking, I blurted out, please refrain from workplace sexual harassment. At that, Jackson froze. He lifted his head, his eyes filled with a deep sorrow. He looked just like a sad little puppy again. I subconsciously reached up and gently ruffled his hair. When I realized what I was doing and tried to pull my hand back, he caught it and leaned down to kiss me. The kiss was nothing like the gentle one from before. It was a stormy, demanding plunder, and he only let me go when I was breathless and dizzy from lack of oxygen. Your kissing has gotten worse, Jackson said. Looks like your ex-boyfriend wasn't very good. My head was spinning. Ex what? I asked, bewildered. Liar, Jackson said, his eyes glinting with obsession. You only ever said you liked me, but you told that alpha, Ryan, that you loved him. You two even had romantic walks under the moon, whispering sweet nothings, strolling down the street. You never did any of that with me. His resentful and hurt expression left me speechless. I didn't know whether to first tell him that Ryan wasn't my ex-boyfriend or to correct him that his delusional interpretation was far from a romantic stroll. After a few seconds of silence, I finally managed to say, "Didn't you always treat me like a tool? I don't think a tool has those obligations." The man who had just been demanding an explanation suddenly deflated as if his tail had been stepped on. "I'm sorry. I'm not. I didn't mean it like that." He started to ramble. "I never thought of you as a tool. I never did. When I first met you, I thought you were another test my father set up for me, but I couldn't help getting close to you. You didn't mind my illness. You accepted me and stayed with me. I wanted you to be by my side forever, but I knew if Arthur found out, he would send you away. I was so scared you would leave me. I had to pretend I didn't like you that much so you could stay. Tim, Ryan, I'm so jealous I could die. Why can't you be completely mine? Why did you have to leave me?" Jackson cupped my face, his voice a soft plea. "Please, Martin. Love me back. Just a little is enough. Can you?" His forehead rested against mine, his eyes begging. I didn't answer him. My head was buzzing. After a long moment, I said, "Your rut is here." In the end, Jackson was sent into isolation before he got my answer. He looked utterly defeated, and even the messy strands of his hair seemed to droop with despair. I felt a pang of pity, but I couldn't give him an answer just yet. I had too much information to process. I wasn't sure if his words were just the rut talking or if they were genuine. Maybe it was a bit of both, but accepting Jackson back into my life was not going to be easy. My mind was so preoccupied with this all day that my work efficiency was practically zero. As a result, I had to work late. On the way home, I felt a constant chill down my back, so I ran the whole way. After a chaotic and confusing day, my dreams were filled with Jackson, his puppy ears drooping, chasing me and calling out, "Give me a little love, Martin, just a little love." The next day, I found Jackson squatting by my apartment building's entrance. He looked much like he did in my dream, listless and weary, just without the puppy ears. "What are you doing here?" At the sound of my voice, Jackson's head shot up. Only then did I notice the unnatural flush on his face and how hoarse his voice was. "Waiting for your answer." He had spent the night outside in the cold wind during his rut. I was afraid he was going to collapse right there. Several of my colleagues lived in this complex. What would they think if they saw Jackson in this state? I had no choice but to call in sick and take a taxi to get him back to his own house. Jackson was restless in the car, his hands wandering, his head nuzzling against me. His hot breath on my skin sent a shiver through me. And he still had the nerve to ask in his raspy voice, "Uranus, answer my ass. If you don't stop moving, I'm throwing you out." That finally made him behave. I had planned to hand him over to the butler, but the man, practically delirious with fever, wouldn't let me go. How could he still be so strong when he was this sick? The old butler maintained his polite smile. "Mr. Jackson doesn't allow us in his room. I'm afraid we'll have to trouble you to take him up, Mr. Martin." I gave him a half smile. "If you all can't go in, what makes you think I can?" The butler looked at Jackson, who was practically melting into my arms despite his fever, and nodded with a chuckle. "I believe you can." I resigned myself to my fate and carried him to his room, getting him settled. I glanced around. The room was exactly as I had left it. Even the figurine with the corner I had accidentally chipped was still in its original spot. Then my eyes fell on the half-open bedside drawer, and I couldn't help but frown. The entire drawer was filled with suppressants of all brands and types. The trash can also had several used applicators. I quietly left the room and, after a moment's hesitation, asked the butler, "Has he been using suppressants all these years?" The butler nodded. "That's reckless." I couldn't hold back my anger. The doctor specifically said he can't use suppressants anymore. Not only are they useless, but they also put more strain on his body. Why is he so careless? What about Caleb? Weren't they a 90% match? Wasn't he supposed to cure him? The butler replied, "Mr. Jackson doesn't let anyone into his room." Mr. Shin tried to sneak in once and used his pheromones to trigger Mr. Jackson's rut. He ended up getting a severe beating for his trouble. After that, The Shin family couldn't take the humiliation and sent Mr. Shin abroad again. He added, "But you can go in, Mr. Martin. Mr. Jackson would be very happy about that." My ears grew hot. I scoffed and mumbled, "He talks a big game," but he never gave me a kind look either. The old butler sighed softly. "Don't be too hard on him. He has his own struggles." The butler brought me a photo album from some storage room. Judging by the dust, it hadn't been opened in a long time. The first page showed a little boy with a radiant smile, about 4 or 5 years old, holding a golden retriever puppy. The boy and the dog were sitting on the grass, bathed in perfect sunlight, a frozen moment in time. Jackson was actually cute as a kid. Perhaps infected by the photo, a small smile touched my lips. That was the first pet Mr. Jackson ever had. His name was Charlie, the butler said, turning the page. In the next photo, Jackson didn't look much older, but his face was tense, all traces of his lively innocence gone. It was a photo of him with Arthur Vance. "What happened to Charlie?" I asked. "Mr. Vance buried him." "Buried him?" My heart lurched. I stared at the lifeless photo, a chill running down my spine, momentarily speechless. The butler patted my back comfortingly. "If you're feeling unwell, you don't have to look." I steadied myself. "I'm fine." Even after knowing him for so many years, I was completely ignorant of Jackson's past. If it weren't for the old butler, I never would have known any of this. If there was still a chance for Jackson and me, then this time we had to stand on equal ground. I hoped that as he saw me, I could also see through him. I want to understand him better. The answer he wanted, I would be able to give it to him when he woke up. But in truth, after hearing the butler's stories, my mind went blank for a long time. I sat numbly by the bed, watching Jackson, who was sleeping restlessly. With a heavy heart, I tucked him in, then pulled the covers back and slid in next to him. Jackson sleepily wrapped his arms around me and instinctively kissed my cheek. "Why is my wife crying?" He was clearly not fully awake, his hands clumsily wiping my face. He cooed as he wiped. "Don't cry, be good." "Is it because of me?" "I'm not trying to force you to choose. If you haven't forgiven me yet, I can wait. I can chase you." His words were swallowed by a kiss. Our breaths mingled. I panted, looking at Jackson with determination. "For years is long enough. You don't have to chase me, Jackson. I already love you." The alpha stared at me, stunned. 1 second, 2 seconds, the hands on my waist suddenly tightened, as if trying to merge me into his body. He panted heavily, deeply inhaling my scent, his voice thick with unconcealed excitement. "Do you know what it means to say something like that to an alpha in his rut?" I could feel his body's reaction and smiled in acceptance. "Not really. Why don't you show me?" We sank into the soft center of the bed. The long mist sensation made my scalp tingle, and I couldn't help but gasp. Someone who had been talking so tough just moments ago ended up soaking me in tears again. Wife, why are you so good to me?" The man, still thrusting and crying, managed to ask a million questions. "Am I yours? Are you mine?" "Yes, I'm yours." In the final moments, I kissed his tear-filled eyes. This is a reward for a very brave boy. When I opened my eyes, Jackson was still asleep. It looked like his rut was almost over. He just needed more rest. The corners of his eyes were red, which was kind of cute. I couldn't resist giving him a little kiss. But then I saw the last person I wanted to see. Arthur Vance was sitting on the sofa, looking at me with the same expression as always, yet somehow everything felt different. He scoffed. "It's been a while, and you seem to have regressed. Can't even greet people properly anymore." I was in a foul mood and shot back, "What do you want?" He looked me up and down, his eyes filled with scorn. "To think the son I poured my heart and soul into raising would fall for a beta like you. How pathetic." "Ha, you call that raising him? Burying his playmate, forcing him to eat his pet rabbit, constantly replacing the nannies he got close to, no attachments, no dependents, no friends," I sneered. "Is that raising a child or caging a puppet?" Arthur glared at me. "You young people don't understand. Emotions are useless. Only profit is supreme." "Profit my ass." I laughed. "Well, your precious profit couldn't defeat your emotional son. Could it?" Arthur's face darkened several shades, but in the end, it all dissolved into a sigh. I underestimated you. You have your methods. After you left, he started taking risks. He was immature in every way, but he fought me recklessly. It only took him a few years to win me over. His eyes were no longer like daggers. He looked at me with a complex mix of emotions. I'm old, and I can't fight him anymore. But can't you at least persuade him to go back and manage the family business instead of just tossing it to those wolf-like relatives? What's he going to accomplish with that dinky little company of his? Before I could argue, a broad shadow fell over me. What are you doing here? Get away from him. Jackson, who had woken up at some point, was in full-on protective mode, standing between us. Looks like I wasn't the only one with PTSD. Arthur stood up, glanced at Jackson, and muttered, "So improper." Then he looked at me behind Jackson and said, "Think about what I said. It would be good for you, too." I chuckled. That's his decision to make. And I don't have any methods. I just love him. It's the same emotional foolishness you despise. After Arthur left, Jackson held me for a long time, still shaken. "All right, let's get you cleaned up and go to the hospital," I said, pushing him away. "No, just a little longer." His pleading didn't work. I still dragged him to the hospital to get his gland checked. The wound from years ago had healed completely, and thankfully, there were no lasting side effects. But what worried me most was his pheromone imbalance syndrome. Jackson sat in the hospital with a sour face, across from Tim, who was wearing a white lab coat. It's a psychosomatic condition. As long as there's no new trauma and he cooperates with the treatment, he can recover slowly. He looked up at me and smiled. "When did you get back? Want to grab dinner tonight? Maybe in a couple of days. Let's get together this weekend," I replied with a smile. Ahem. Ahem. Jackson interrupted our reunion with a very conspicuous cough. "My neck still kind of hurts. Orthopedics is to the right on your way out," Tim said, tapping his pen on the medical report without looking up. "And men who are always coughing like that usually aren't very good, you know. Are you sure you don't want to reconsider?" That last part was directed at me. The next second, a blushing Jackson was dragging me out of the hospital. Once we were in the car, he buried his face in my chest and mumbled, "Wife, don't talk to him. You know whether I'm good or not, right?" Then he looked up at me, his eyes wet and pleading. "Wife, my rut isn't over yet." I patted his head and chuckled. "I know. Get in the back seat." "Not here." My phone, which I had left on the passenger seat, vibrated twice. It was a message from Tim. "Just be careful." Anyway, none of the other alphas I know suddenly start calling someone wife just because they're in a rut. I went back to work at the company. I had asked Jackson about what his father said, but he was still set on running his current company. "I love this industry, and I want to be with you." While getting coffee in the break room, I overheard a few of the younger girls discussing what Mr. Vance's pheromones might smell like. I was a beta, so I couldn't smell pheromones. Besides, Jackson was a master at concealing his scent. Even Tim didn't know what his pheromones smelled like. Some said red wine, some said vodka, and others guessed it would be a cold, woody scent. They were all wrong. After one session, I pestered him for ages until, completely red under the covers, he finally whispered a single, barely audible word. "Strawberry." Who would have thought a 6'3" alpha would smell like strawberries? "What about you? What do you think Mr. Vance's pheromones smell like?" The question was directed at me. I thought for a moment and said seriously, "Like a puppy." Leaving them with their bewildered looks, I smiled, grabbed my files, and walked into the CEO's office. The moment I entered, I was grabbed and pushed down onto the extra-wide, extra-long sofa. Wife, my rut is here. Stop pretending. You're already better, and didn't you get enough last night?" Jackson whined, "NGGGH, not enough." I pulled a black, diamond-studded collar from my file pouch and snapped it around his neck with a click. His eyes sparkled as he looked from me to the collar. "Thank you, wife. So, can we now?" "Yes." The next thing I knew, the world was spinning as he excitedly carried me into the adjoining break room. See? At his core, he's just a puppy. And I love puppies most of all.